The dusty main street of Redstone froze in time when she pointed. Her finger shook like a twig in a storm, her eyes wild and burning with something between fear and fury. The townsfolk followed the line of her trembling hand until every gaze landed on a tall, broad-shouldered cowboy standing by the trough, a half-smoked cigarette hanging from his lips. "That's him," she said, voice cracking. "He killed my father." The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. The piano in the saloon stuttered to a stop. Dice froze mid-roll. A whiskey glass slipped from someone's hand and shattered on the wooden floor, the sound echoing like a gunshot. Every man and woman on Main Street turned to look at Evelyn May Carter, the woman who hadn't set foot in Redstone for nearly 8 years. Evelyn stood in the center of the street, her brown coat coated with dust from the desert, her boots worn thin. The sun was a burning coin above her, and beads of sweat rolled down her temple, tracing the small scar beneath her right eye. She looked older than her 30 years, worn down by loss and by the ghost she carried. And the cowboy she accused, Reed Lawson, didn't flinch. He didn't even turn fully toward her at first, just tilted his head slightly, eyes narrowing under the brim of his hat. His hand rested easy on his belt, fingers brushing the handle of his revolver. Someone whispered, "Reed Lawson? The man who broke the Dalton gang?" Another muttered, "No way he's a killer of ranchers." "That's Evelyn Carter talkin', Crazy Carter's girl." The sheriff, Tom Hargreaves, pushed through the crowd, his spurs clinking like angry rattles. "Now hold on," he barked. "Nobody's killing nobody today. Lower your weapons." Evelyn's voice cracked like glass. "You remember the night, Sheriff, the Carter Ranch fire. My father burned alive while your men said it was an accident. I saw him there. Reed Lawson." The crowd gasped. Faces turned to Reed, searching for guilt for anything. Reed finally met her gaze. His eyes were steel gray, the kind of eyes that had seen too many graves and too much blood. "You're wrong," he said quietly. "You saw someone, maybe, but it wasn't me." Evelyn stepped forward. "You rode a black horse. You wore that same duster coat. I saw your face in the flames." Reed dropped his cigarette and ground it under his boot. "Lots of men rode black horses. Lots wore dusters. You want justice, Miss Carter? Maybe start by looking in the right direction." The sheriff raised his hand, sweat dripping down his temple. "That's enough, both of you." But before he could finish, a shrill whistle cut through the heat. The sound didn't belong to any man or wind. It was the eerie song of death from somewhere high above. An arrow struck the ground between Evelyn and Reed, its shaft quivering, the black feather glinting under the sun. Gasps rippled through the street. Women screamed. Men stumbled back, hands flying to their guns. Reed's eyes snapped to the rooftops, scanning the ridges that framed the town. The sheriff froze, staring at the strange symbols carved into the arrow's shaft. "Apache." He muttered. The word fell like a curse. Instantly, men ran for cover. The saloon doors slammed shut. Horses reared in panic. Evelyn stood rooted in the dirt, staring at the arrow as if it had grown from the earth itself. Her voice barely rose above a whisper. "Why would they?" Red cut her off sharply. "They're not shooting blind. That arrow was meant to stop us talking." The sheriff turned to him, tense. "You know something about this, Lawson?" Reed's jaw tightened. "More than I'd like." Evelyn stepped closer, eyes burning. "Then speak, cowboy. Or are you afraid your sins finally found their way home?" For the first time, something flickered in Reed's face, not fear, but regret. "You shouldn't have come back here, Evelyn," he said softly. "This town's built on lies and graves. And your father—" He dug the first one. Before she could demand what he meant, the whistle came again, this time from the far end of town. Another arrow sliced the air, landing near the sheriff's boots. Its feathers were red this time, and a thin strip of leather was tied to it, marked with an Apache word that only Reed seemed to recognize. He whispered it under his breath. Reckoning. Evelyn looked up at the canyon ridge beyond Redstone. Shadows moved against the dying light, tall, silent figures with long hair and painted faces, watching Dot, and though no one fired a gun or said another word, the message was clear. The truth Evelyn had come seeking wasn't buried after all. Dot, it was coming for them. The crowd in Redstone scattered like startled birds. Boots pounded against the wooden walkways, mothers snatched up their children, and the sheriff's shouts vanished beneath the storm of panic. Dust swirled in thick golden clouds, wrapping the street in a restless haze. Evelyn stood frozen beside the arrow, her breath sharp and uneven. The black feathered shaft quivered in the earth as if it had a heartbeat of its own. Her mind spun. She hadn't seen an Apache arrow in this part of Arizona for years. Not since the war bands were driven south. The sheriff's voice cut through the chaos. Everybody back inside. You too, Evelyn. But she didn't move. Her eyes were locked on the rooftops where the glint of sunlight caught something metallic, maybe a blade, maybe just a trick of the eye. Reed Lawson stepped toward her, slow and deliberate. You shouldn't stand in the open, he said quietly, his voice calm but edged. They ain't warning shots, not from Apaches. She turned sharply toward him. And how would you know what's a warning from them? Reed's gaze stayed fixed on the rooftops. Because I've seen their warnings before, and I've earned a few of them. The sheriff reached them, panting. Reed, you got any idea what this means? Apache don't just shoot into towns unless someone brought their ghosts here. Reed finished. Evelyn's heart skipped. Ghosts? She repeated, voice trembling. You think my father's death is a ghost story? Reed looked down at her, eyes unreadable. I think your father's death ain't as simple as you think, Miss Carter. The tension between them burned hotter than the noonday sun. Evelyn's hands curled into fists. You killed him. I don't care what stories you spin. I saw your face. I'll never forget it. Reed took a step closer, lowering his voice. You saw a face through smoke and fire. Maybe that ain't the same thing. The sheriff tried to intervene again, but his voice faded when a new sound rolled through the street, a low, rhythmic thud. Hooves. Every man still outside turned to look toward the edge of town, where the desert opened into a sea of red dust and scattered sagebrush. A lone rider was approaching, moving like a shadow through the heat-hazed Dot. As he drew closer, Evelyn could see the paint on his skin, red clay smeared in symbols she couldn't read. His long black hair shimmered in the sun, and his bare chest glistened with sweat and dust. Around his neck hung a necklace of bone and turquoise. The townsfolk who hadn't run now froze, their fear thick in the air. Apache, someone whispered. The rider dismounted with silent grace, bow in one hand, tomahawk in the other. His eyes, dark and sharp as obsidian, swept the crowd and then settled on Reed Lawson. Evelyn's pulse quickened. She stepped forward, but the sheriff raised his arm in front of her. Stay back, Evelyn. The Apache warrior stopped a few paces from them and spoke in a deep, calm voice. You should listen to the woman, he said. She speaks truth. Every sound in the town died. The sheriff blinked. You speak English? The warrior's lips curved into something like a smirk. Better than most of you speak honesty. Evelyn stared at him. Who are you? He met her eyes, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed to still. There was no malice there, only something old and knowing. My name is Taza, he said. And I was there the night your father died. Reed stiffened. You're lying. Taza tilted his head. If I lie, then tell them what you did in the valley that night. Tell them about the fire that swallowed his house and the 3 riders who brought it. Evelyn's breath caught. 3 riders? She whispered Taz and nodded once. Your father was no fool. He knew something that powerful men didn't want told. That's why he died, and why this man, he pointed at Reed, still carries that guilt in his eyes. Reed's jaw clenched, his hand twitching near his gun. Careful what you say next, Apache. Taza didn't blink. You burned a man's home to bury a secret, but the desert doesn't bury truth, it remembers. Evelyn's throat tightened. She looked from Reed to Taza, confusion and anger tearing through her chest. If you both were there, then one of you's lying, she said. And I'll find out which. A sudden gust of wind tore through the street, lifting the dust in spirals. Somewhere in that swirling haze, a shadow moved on the ridges above, more riders. The Apache weren't alone. Taza turned his gaze toward the canyon. The others wait for my word, he said. They came for truth, not war. But if lies are all they find. He looked at Reed again, eyes burning like the desert sun. Then blood will answer for fire. And with that, he stepped back into the dust, vanishing as quickly as he'd appeared. Leaving the town trembling in his wake, Evelyn stared after him. Heart pounding, the echo of his words still ringing in her ears. She turned to Reed, her voice barely a whisper. What did you do, Reed? Reed's eyes were cold steel. What I had to, he said, but even he didn't sound convinced. By nightfall, the town of Redstone had become a ghost of itself. Doors were barred, windows shuttered, and oil lamps flickered behind drawn curtains. The arrow still stood in the dirt where it had landed. Quivering in the breeze, a silent reminder that something far older and darker than their town's laws was stirring. Evelyn May Carter sat in the sheriff's office, her face half lit by lamplight. Her hands wouldn't stop trembling. The smell of whiskey and gun oil filled the room. Sheriff Hargreaves paced behind his desk, muttering curses beneath his breath. I can't keep the peace if you keep digging up old graves. Evelyn, he said finally. She shot him a glare. Old graves are where the truth lies, Sheriff. You just never had the courage to dig deep enough. He sighed, rubbing the bridge of his nose. Your father's death was ruled accidental. The fire started in the stables. You found what Reed Lawson told you to find, she snapped. The sheriff's jaw tightened. Watch your tongue. Reed's no saint, but he's saved more lives in this territory than you know. Evelyn leaned forward. And how many did he burn to save himself? Before he could answer, the door creaked open. A gust of cold desert air swept in, and standing in the doorway, tall and silent as a shadow, was Taza. The sheriff's hand went straight to his revolver. You've got a lot of nerve walking in here, Apache. Taza raised one hand calmly. If I wanted war, Sheriff, I wouldn't knock. Evelyn rose to her feet. You said you were there? The night my father died. Tell me everything. The Apache warrior stepped inside, his bare chest catching the lamplight, bone and turquoise beads clinking softly as he moved. His eyes, deep and unreadable, settled on Evelyn. You deserve to know, he said. But truth has a cost. Reed Lawson entered behind him, his expression stone hard. Don't listen to him, he warned. He'll twist it all. Taza didn't even glance at Reed. I don't twist. I remember. Evelyn's pulse quickened. Then speak. Taza's gaze drifted toward the window, out into the darkness beyond. Your father's ranch sat on a wellspring, he began. A deep one, old water that ran beneath the valley. The army wanted it. The railroad wanted it. Your father refused to sell. Evelyn frowned. My father wasn't a rich man. What did they care about one patch of desert? Taza's eyes glimmered in the lamplight. Because beneath that desert was life, and control over life in a place like this is power. The sheriff's voice trembled slightly. What are you saying, Apache? Taza turned toward him. I'm saying the fire wasn't an accident. 3 riders came that night. One wore the coat of a hired gun. One carried a government seal. And one, he looked at Reed, rode a black horse with a duster coat. Evelyn's breath caught. You saw him? Taza nodded once. I saw him pull your father from the burning barn, alive, but wounded. I saw him hand your father to the man with the seal. And then, he paused. The man shot him. Evelyn's knees nearly gave out. No, you're lying. Reed's voice broke through the silence, low and sharp. He's twisting the story. I tried to save your father, Evelyn. I didn't pull the trigger. Taza's tone grew colder. You still rode with them. You still took their coin. Reed's hand trembled near his gun. Because I thought we were burning an empty barn, not killing a man who helped your people. Evelyn looked between them, confusion swirling with rage. What are you talking about? Helped your people? Taza stepped closer. Your father was no enemy to us. He gave my tribe food when we starved. He gave us water when the soldiers poisoned our wells. He was one of the few who treated us as human. That's why they wanted him gone. And that's why, his voice lowered like distant thunder. I watched his killers burn. Reed slammed his fist on the sheriff's desk. You think you know everything, Apache? You don't know the orders I was under. Evelyn turned on him, tears streaking through the dirt on her cheeks. You had orders to murder my father? Reed's voice cracked. I had orders to scare him, not kill him. I didn't know what they'd do until it was too late. The room filled with heavy silence. The sheriff swallowed hard, glancing between them, lost for words. Finally, Evelyn spoke, voice trembling but firm. Who gave the order, Reed? Reed looked down at the floor. You wouldn't believe me if I told you. Try me. He met her gaze with hollow eyes. The same man who built this town. Taza nodded slowly, grimly. The man who owns your sheriff. The man who hides behind his church pew on Sundays. Evelyn felt her stomach twist. You mean Mayor Winslow? The Apache warrior's silence was answer enough. Outside. A coyote howled, and the oil lamp flickered, casting shadows that danced like flames against the walls. Taza turned toward the door. The past is awake, Evelyn Carter, he said quietly. And it's thirsty. As he stepped into the night, Evelyn could almost hear the faint crackle of fire in the distance, the past burning its way back toward her. The dawn came quietly over the wastelands, painting the horizon in golden blood. Wind rolled over the sand like whispers of the dead, voices that refused to fade. Evelyn May Carter trudged beside Taza, her boots sinking into the soft dust, every step echoing the burden of what she had learned. Behind her, the burned ruins of the old trading post lay far away, swallowed by the desert's endless horizon. Taza moved ahead without a word. His body was painted with the dust of travel, muscles tight under the rising sun, each step silent, precise, like he belonged to the earth itself. His long black hair caught the light, and the turquoise beads on his neck shimmered with each motion. He carried his spear in one hand, the silver sheriff's badge tied to it now, swinging lightly as he walked. Evelyn's throat was dry, but not from the heat. Why did you bring me out here? She asked, voice cracking. You said you'd tell me what happened, all of it. Taza stopped. For a moment, he didn't answer. The desert stretched around them, vast and merciless, the sky a white blaze above. Then he turned, eyes dark as obsidian. You're walking on it, he said quietly. Walking on what? Graves. The word hit her like a blow. He knelt and drew a line in the sand with the butt of his spear. 10 years ago, my people made peace with Redstone. We traded horses, food, helped build the bridge near the canyon. Then someone burned our camp. Women, children, elders. Those who ran toward the river were shot. Evelyn's heartbeat thundered in her ears. She remembered the fire. She had been a child then, watching smoke rise over the valley. Her father had ridden out that night with other men from town. He came back at dawn, face gray, coat smelling of smoke. Her voice trembled. "You think my father, I know he was there," Taza cut in, not with anger, but with the weary calm of someone who'd carried pain too long. "Your father, Sheriff Lawson, and 3 others. They said an Apache boy stole cattle. That was the lie they used." She shook her head, tears welling. "No, my father he was good. He wouldn't have." But the image of him in the doorway, face haunted by something he never spoke of, burned behind her eyes. Taza's gaze softened. "He tried to stop them at the end. I saw him. That's why you're still alive." Evelyn looked up sharply. "What do you mean?" He pointed to the ridge in the distance where the land dipped into a hidden canyon. "Your father hid one survivor, a child. The fire was meant to erase everything, but the desert doesn't forget." Lightning flashed faintly on the far edge of the horizon, though no storm followed. Evelyn followed his gaze. "Who was the child?" Taza met her eyes. "Me." The world seemed to tilt. For a heartbeat, everything went silent, no wind, no sound, only the echo of her pulse in her ears. Evelyn took a step back. "That's not possible. You were there that night?" "I remember your father's coat," he said, his voice low. "He carried me from the fire. Sighed, 'Don't let them see you.' He left me near the river, and I ran until the land took me in." Her hands trembled. She had hated her father for his silence, for his drinking, for the guilt he never explained. And now she knew. The man who had saved this warrior was the same man who had helped start the fire. Taza turned away, his shadow long on the sand. "I came back to Redstone to find truth, not revenge." He paused, then added, "But the town has blood buried deep. When I saw you point at Lawson, I knew you'd stumbled into the same trail." Evelyn followed him, the air thick with dust and ghosts. They climbed the ridge and looked down into the canyon below. The rocks were scorched black, and among them, half-buried bones gleamed faintly in the morning light. Evelyn fell to her knees. "Dear God." Taza's voice was soft, but it carried like wind. "The desert remembers everything, even lies." And far off, in the distance where Redstone's rooftop shimmered in the heat, a thin column of smoke began to rise again. The past, it seemed, was ready to burn once more. Part 5. The Guns of Redstone, 700 words. By the time Evelyn May Carter and Taza reached Redstone, the sun had turned the sky to fire. The desert wind carried the scent of gun oil and fear. The town that once bustled with miners and ranch hands was now ghostly still. Shutters closed, horses restless, and every man's hand close to his holster. Evelyn felt every eye on her as she and Taza walked down the main street. Her boots struck the boards of the boardwalk with sharp, echoing thuds. Beside her, Taza moved silently, spear slung across his back, long black hair whipping in the wind. His skin glowed bronze beneath the fading light, his chest painted with red and black lines, marks of memory and battle. The turquoise and bone jewelry at his neck caught the sun like shards of fire. At the far end of the street, Sheriff Lawson stood in front of his office, hand resting on his revolver, hat low over his eyes. Around him, 5 armed townsmen waited, rifles glinting, eyes cold. Lawson's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come back, Evelyn." Her jaw tightened. "You've been hiding something, Sheriff." "My father, the fire. I know the truth now." The sheriff's gaze flicked to Taza, and his face hardened. "You think you know, but you don't understand what happens when fear takes hold of a town." Taza stepped forward. "Fear doesn't burn women and children. Men do." His voice was steady, but it carried like thunder in the dry air. and some of those men still wear badges. The men beside Lawson raised their rifles. Evelyn's breath caught. "Stop!" she shouted. "You'll only prove him right." Lawson's fingers twitched near his holster. His voice was low, almost pleading. "Evelyn, your father wanted peace. But when they said the Apaches were coming to raid, the people turned on him. He tried to stop them." "He tried," Taza interrupted, his tone cutting through the tension. "He did stop them from killing me. He saved me when no one else would." Lawson's eyes flickered, the mask slipping for a moment. He looked at Evelyn, regret etched deep into his weathered face. "Your father saved that boy, but they burned the camp anyway. I was too late to stop it." Evelyn's voice shook. "And then you buried it. All of it. You made him live with the guilt until it killed him." For the first time, Lawson's voice cracked. "He begged me to keep you safe, to never let the truth come out, because he feared what the town would do." A harsh laugh escaped Taza. "The town's already done it, twice." The tension snapped when one of the riflemen muttered, "Enough talk," and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the ground near Taza's feet, sending up a spray of dust. In an instant, the Apache moved, a blur of power and grace. He lunged forward, striking the rifle from the man's hands with the butt of his spear. The movement fluid as wind through reeds. Gunfire erupted. Evelyn dove behind a trough, bullets slicing the air. Taza rolled across the dirt, spear flashing, disarming another man before sweeping his legs from under him. His muscles rippled in the sunlight, his long hair whipping wildly as he moved with lethal precision, a spirit of vengeance brought to life. Lawson fired once, a warning shot, shouting, "Stop! For God's sake, stop!" But no one listened. Evelyn grabbed a fallen revolver and aimed at the sky, firing a single shot that echoed through the street like a lightning strike. The sound froze everyone for a moment. Dust hung in the air. The silence after was deafening. Taza stood tall, chest heaving, eyes burning. "You can kill me," he said, voice raw, "but you'll never kill the truth. The land already remembers. And soon, everyone will." Lawson lowered his gun. His shoulders sagged as though the weight of a decade had finally crushed him. "Then let it be remembered," he murmured. "All of it." Evelyn stepped out, revolver still trembling in her hand. "Then tell them. Tell them what you did." The sheriff nodded slowly. "Bring the people. Bring them all. If this town's going to burn again, let it be from the truth, not hate." As the last rays of sunlight bled away, the people of Redstone began to gather. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and Evelyn realized that the day her father died and the day the fire began were finally about to meet, and standing beside her, silent and unbroken, Taza watched the town that had killed his people prepare to face the ghosts it had buried for far too long. By the time Evelyn May Carter and Taza reached Redstone, the sun had turned the sky to fire. The desert wind carried the scent of gun oil and fear. The town that once bustled with miners and ranch hands was now ghostly still, shutters closed, horses restless, and every man's hand close to his holster. Evelyn felt every eye on her as she and Taza walked down the main street. Her boots struck the boards of the boardwalk with sharp, echoing thuds. Beside her, Taza moved silently, spear slung across his back, long black hair whipping in the wind. His skin glowed bronze beneath the fading light, his chest painted with red and black lines, marks of memory and battle. The turquoise and bone jewelry at his neck caught the sun like shards of fire. At the far end of the street, Sheriff Lawson stood in front of his office, hand resting on his revolver, hat low over his eyes. Around him, 5 armed townsmen waited, rifles glinting, eyes cold. Lawson's voice broke the silence. "You shouldn't have come back, Evelyn." Her jaw tightened. "You've been hiding something, Sheriff." My father, the fire. I know the truth now. The sheriff's gaze flicked to Taza, and his face hardened. You think you know, but you don't understand what happens when fear takes hold of a town. Taza stepped forward. Fear doesn't burn women and children. Men do. His voice was steady, but it carried like thunder in the dry air. And some of those men still wear badges. The men beside Lawson raised their rifles. Evelyn's breath caught. Stop, she shouted. You'll only prove him right. Lawson's fingers twitched near his holster. His voice was low, almost pleading. Evelyn, your father wanted peace. But when they said the Apaches were coming to raid, the people turned on him. He tried to stop them. He tried. Taza interrupted, his tone cutting through the tension. He did stop them from killing me. He saved me when no one else would. Lawson's eyes flickered, the mask slipping for a moment. He looked at Evelyn, regret etched deep into his weathered face. Your father saved that boy, but they burned the camp anyway. I was too late to stop it. Evelyn's voice shook. And then you buried it. All of it. You made him live with the guilt until it killed him. For the first time, Lawson's voice cracked. He begged me to keep you safe, to never let the truth come out because he feared what the town would do. A harsh laugh escaped Taza. The town's already done it, twice. The tension snapped when one of the riflemen muttered, Enough talk, and pulled the trigger. The bullet struck the ground near Taza's feet, sending up a spray of dust. In an instant, the Apache moved, a blur of power and grace. He lunged forward, striking the rifle from the man's hands with the butt of his spear. The movement fluid as wind through reeds. Gunfire erupted. Evelyn dove behind a trough, bullets slicing the air. Taza rolled across the dirt, spear flashing, disarming another man before sweeping his legs from under him. His muscles rippled in the sunlight, his long hair whipping wildly as he moved with lethal precision, a spirit of vengeance brought to life. Lawson fired once, a warning shot, shouting, Stop! For God's sake, stop! But no one listened. Evelyn grabbed a fallen revolver and aimed at the sky, firing a single shot that echoed through the street like a lightning strike. The sound froze everyone for a moment. Dust hung in the air. The silence after was deafening. Taza stood tall, chest heaving, eyes burning. You can kill me, he said, voice raw, but you'll never kill the truth. The land already remembers. And soon, everyone will. Lawson lowered his gun. His shoulders sagged as though the weight of a decade had finally crushed him. Then let it be remembered, he murmured. All of it. Evelyn stepped out, revolver still trembling in her hand. Then tell them. Tell them what you did. The sheriff nodded slowly. Bring the people. Bring them all. If this town's going to burn again, let it be from the truth, not hate. As the last rays of sunlight bled away, the people of Redstone began to gather. Shadows stretched long across the ground, and Evelyn realized that the day her father died and the day the fire began were finally about to meet, and standing beside her. Silent and unbroken, Taza watched the town that had killed his people prepare to face the ghosts it had buried for far too long. The bell above the Redstone church rang once, a hollow metallic cry that echoed through the empty streets. The townsfolk gathered slowly, drawn by whispers of confession and fear. Faces peeked from doorways, hands clutched rifles and lanterns, and eyes darted toward the center of the square where Sheriff Lawson stood on the steps, his weathered hat in his hands. Beside him were Evelyn May Carter and Taza, the Apache warrior whose presence seemed carved from the desert itself. Shirtless under the dim light of dusk, his skin gleamed like burnished copper. The tribal jewelry around his neck and arms caught the lantern glow, while the crimson and black paint across his chest stood out against the shadows, symbols of the lives lost, of vengeance withheld. The night was windless. Even the horses were silent. Evelyn's heart hammered in her chest. She could feel the stares, not of strangers, but of neighbors she'd known all her life. They looked at her now as if she'd betrayed them simply by standing beside Taza. She took a steadying breath, dust on her lips. "Tell them," she said to the sheriff. "Tell them everything." Lawson swallowed hard. His voice cracked when he finally spoke. 10 years ago, the fire that destroyed the Apache camp wasn't an accident. We said it was revenge for cattle stolen, but that was a lie. It was about land. Murmurs rippled through the crowd like dry leaves. He went on, eyes fixed on the ground. The Carter family owned most of the grazing land north of the canyon. But a treaty was signed, one that would have given the Apache people water rights and shared use of the pasture. The townsfolk didn't like it, so we were told to make it look like the Apaches broke the truce. Evelyn's stomach twisted. "Who gave the order?" Lawson's hand trembled as he lifted his head. "Your father didn't. He tried to stop it. The one who gave the order was your uncle, Thomas Carter." The name struck her like a gunshot. "My uncle?" He gathered men in secret. Said it was the only way to keep Redstone alive. I was young, foolish. I went along. His voice broke. "Your father found out too late. He rode to warn them. I followed him. When we got there, the fire was already spreading." The crowd grew restless, a few gasps, a few curses. Someone shouted, "He's lying." But no one stepped forward to stop him. Lawson continued, voice hoarse. "Your father dragged a child from the flames. This man," he said, gesturing to Taza. "He carried him to the river, made me swear to protect the secret. Said the town would tear itself apart if it ever learned the truth. He never forgave himself." Taza's gaze never wavered. "He saved me. And now I save his truth." Lawson nodded slowly. "I'll take the blame. I'll answer for what I did. But the Carters, they built their name on stolen land and blood. That's the truth no one here wanted to face." The crowd turned to Evelyn, suspicion, fear, guilt all swirling in their eyes. For a moment, she couldn't breathe. Then she lifted her chin. "You wanted to burn away the past," she said, voice steady, "but you burned your souls with it. My father died trying to make it right. I'll finish what he started." Taza stepped forward, his deep voice steady. "The land remembers. And it's time it was given back." He reached into his satchel and pulled out a piece of weathered parchment, the treaty, edges charred but words still legible. He held it up before the lantern light. "This was buried with the bones of my people. I dug it out." Gasps filled the square. Even the hardest men lowered their weapons. Evelyn turned to Lawson. "What happens now?" He looked out at the people he'd sworn to protect, the same people who had followed fear instead of truth. "Now," he said, "we face what we did." From the far side of the square, thunder rolled, distant, low, like a drumbeat from the mountains. Taza looked up toward the sound, eyes narrowing. On the horizon, under the rising moon, torches flickered, riders approaching fast. "They're coming," he murmured. "Not for war, but for the dead." The crowd froze. The past, it seemed, had decided to ride home, and as the wind picked up, carrying the smell of dust and memory, Evelyn realized the night wasn't over, not by a long shot. The rumble came first, distant, low, like thunder rolling beneath the earth. Then the glow appeared on the horizon, a slow advancing wave of orange light that shimmered through the desert haze. The townsfolk of Redstone turned as one, fear written across every face. Evelyn May Carter stepped forward, her coat whipping in the wind, her eyes fixed on the canyon road beyond the town. She could see them now, Apache riders, dozens of them, torches burning like stars of fire, their silhouettes cutting sharp lines against the night sky. Beside her stood Taza, silent and unmoving, a living shadow of strength and memory. The red and black markings across his chest gleamed in the torchlight, his turquoise and bone jewelry glinting with each movement. His long black hair flowed freely in the wind, and in his right hand the spear with the silver badge trembled faintly, catching the light with every flicker of flame. Evelyn's voice barely rose above the wind. "They've come for vengeance." Taza's gaze stayed on the approaching riders. "They've come for justice." "It's not the same." The Apache riders slowed as they entered the edge of town. Horses snorted, hooves kicking up dust. The leader, an older warrior with white paint streaked down his face, dismounted, his expression carved from stone. He looked at Taza, then at the sheriff, and finally at the townsfolk who watched in frozen silence. "You called for the truth," the old warrior said in Apache, his voice deep and steady. "Now truth stands before you." Taza answered in the same tongue, his words calm but heavy. Evelyn couldn't understand all of it, but the tone, the deep sorrow beneath his control, told her everything. This wasn't just a meeting. It was a reckoning. Lawson stepped forward slowly, trembling. "If you've come to kill me," he said hoarsely, "I won't run." Taza turned to him, then looked at Evelyn. "He's not the only one who carries guilt," he said quietly. "This town, this land, all of it was built on bones. But killing won't wash the blood away. It'll only feed it." The old Apache leader studied him for a long moment, then nodded. "You speak like your father." Evelyn blinked. "His father?" Taza looked at her, his dark eyes reflecting the flames. "The man your father saved, that boy was me. But the man who taught me what mercy is was my father, the one they burned." His voice wavered just slightly, but he did not look away. He said forgiveness is the only fire that doesn't destroy. The silence that followed was unbearable. Then Evelyn stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "If my name was built on lies," she said, "then I'll give it back. Every acre, every paper my uncle forged, it belongs to your people. My father wanted peace. Let that be his legacy." A murmur swept through the crowd. A few townsmen protested, "That land feeds our cattle." But none dared move against her. The sheriff lowered his head. "She's right," he said. "It's time." The old warrior looked to Taza again. "Do you believe her?" Taza nodded slowly. "I do. The desert remembers truth, and she carries her father's spirit." The warrior raised his hand. The other Apache riders dismounted, torches still burning. One by one, they pressed their spears into the earth, letting the flames gutter out until the night grew quiet again. The message was clear. The war was over. Evelyn let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. The wind shifted, carrying the faint scent of rain. Somewhere in the distance, thunder rumbled again, not a threat this time, but a promise. Taza turned toward her. His expression softened for the first time since she'd met him. "You could have run," he said quietly, "but you stood your ground." She met his gaze. "I was done running from ghosts." He looked out over the desert, where dawn's first light began to creep across the horizon. The fire was gone, but the ashes glowed faintly, a sign that something new might yet rise as the first sunbeams touched the land. Taza planted his spear in the earth beside the burned treaty parchment. The silver badge tied to it caught the light, gleaming like redemption. Evelyn asked softly, "What happens now?" Taza smiled faintly, not with joy, but with peace hard won. "Now," he said, "we build something the desert won't have to remember." The people of Redstone stood silent, humbled. The Apache riders watched the sunrise without reaching for their weapons. And for the first time in a decade, the wind carried no smoke, only the scent of wet earth and forgiveness. The sins of the past had finally met their dawn, and the desert, vast and eternal, exhaled.